Hi, this is Sherry Gallagher with Technicon Company Incorporated, and this video is going to address design and development for ISO 13485-2016. The design and development process can be excluded from the certification of ISO 13485-2016. If your organization is design responsible, then the requirements of the standard are straightforward to implement and really a pretty good business practice. There's no conflict to implementing design in ISO 13485-2016 if you already have ISO 9001-2015 certification. Since ISO 13485 expects procedures, the documentation of the design process is a bit more direct. For starters, you should have a procedure for design and development. The elements of the process that should be documented are: plan the design development, define the design inputs, define the design outputs, hold design reviews at suitable stages, perform verification and validation as appropriate, have a procedure for the transfer of the design to manufacturing, control changes, and maintain a file for each medical device type. The major differences between the two standards are ISO 13485 expects changes to the plan and requires that the changes will be documented. 9001 doesn't reference changes to the plan. ISO 13485 requires the designers to be competent. Now, think about section 6.2, human resources and competency. This is where it's referring back to. I think ISO 9001 assumes that you will only have competent people. ISO 13485 requires a medical device file for each family of product. That's a requirement that is not anywhere in ISO 9001. ISO 13485 requires defined responsibilities and authority. So who has the right to approve and continue or stop the design? ISO 13485 requires traceability from outputs to inputs. That's implied in 9001. Now, ISO 9001 specifically addresses the control of interfaces between persons involved in the design, which 13485 does not, but it's not a bad idea. And ISO 9001 also specifically addresses involving customers and suppliers in the design process. Again, ISO 13485 kind of leaves that up to the designer's discretion. ISO 13485 has specific planning documentation requirements. Before you start, you should have identified the stages and the necessary design review points. So when are you going to get together and check the project progress? You don't want to plan on designing a horse and end up with a camel. Define the verification, validation, and transfer activities to progress to the next stage. How do you know when to move on? This is very difficult for creative people. Most strive for perfection and can spend so long that the project is obsolete before it is completed. Define who has responsibility and authority. Who says it is okay to go forward and must direct the project to go forward? This is very important to keep a project on track. You have to ensure traceability of the outputs back to the inputs. When you get finished, can you relate the results to your starting point? You have to identify the resources needed, including competency. People are key to the creation of new ideas. They must be capable to create reality out of a concept. After the project is planned, and frequently in conjunction with planning, the design inputs need to be defined. This is a place to ask customers what they want and to look at supplier surveys. Inputs should include functionality, performance, usability, safety requirements, and consider the intended use. Now, that's very important. It's the intended use, not the possible misuse. Inputs should also include applicable regulatory requirements and standards. This is actually in both ISO 9001 and 13485. What are your risk management outputs? What is the risk that you are willing to accept in this project? Information derived from previous or similar designs. So if it's a new design and you're entering the market, what's going to make your widget superior to everyone else's? If it's a derivation of one of your existing designs, what problems did you run into with those that you should try and avoid this time? And then finally, there's always the catch-all. Anything else needed to design the product and production process. So after the list of inputs has been defined, they must be reviewed. Are they complete, unambiguous, able to be verified or validated, and not in conflict with each other? I know this sounds obvious, but it isn't. The design outputs are straightforward. You must meet the input requirements. Did you actually get the horse and not the camel? Provide the information for purchasing and production. Can it be manufactured? That's always critical. When my husband was in architecture school, they used to come up with designs and they would be asked, okay, so how are you going to hold that together? And they had this idea that they called studentite. It was a fictitious element that wouldn't hold it together, so it was actually not a buildable house or building. You have to contain or reference product acceptance criteria. What's good and what's not. You're going to be working inside tolerances. When do you have tolerance conflict? Specify the characteristics of the product essential for safe and proper use. So maybe surface finish isn't that critical, but the functionality is. Be in a form suitable to verify against design inputs. Again, this sounds simple, but think about how are you going to measure the outputs and how are you going to compare them to the inputs. And finally, on the design outputs, you must have the approval prior to release. In between defining the design inputs and producing the design outputs, the design will be reviewed at intervals defined in the design plan. The purpose of the design reviews are to evaluate the ability of the results of the design process to meet requirements and identify and propose necessary actions. So are you going to go on? Have you met the requirements to this point of the design? If not, what do you need to do to meet those requirements? In the design reviews and at the completion of the project, the design must be verified and validated. The purpose is to ensure the design outputs have met the design inputs. The verification and validation must demonstrate that the design outputs meet the design inputs. They must have documented plans including method, acceptance criteria, and statistical techniques and size, sample size for the verification and validation. If the product is intended to be connected to or interface with other medical devices, verification and validation must confirm the outputs meet the inputs when connected or interfaced with that other equipment. That's very important. That's something that has been problems in the past for some companies. Validations must be representative product. That must be off production tooling and equipment, not pre-production molds. Validation, you must validate that regulatory requirements have been met and undergone clinical trials. Validation must be completed prior to release to the customer. Records of the results and conclusions and necessary actions must be documented. Now, once the design is verified and validated, the design process is not complete. The design must be documented for the transfer to manufacturer and the suppliers. This is the generation of drawings, specifications, production plans, test methods. The design team is responsible to confirm production is capable of producing the product to specifications and within tolerances. If not, they must work with production until the production is capable. Now, once the design is in production, the design team is still not finished. There must be procedures to control design change. The design team should be looking at the impact of the change on function, performance, usability, safety, and the regulatory requirements. And changes shall be identified, reviewed, verified, and validated, so you might have to repeat all of the original testing and validation, approved, and the effect on the constituent parts and products in process or delivered has to be evaluated and a disposition determined. And finally, the risk created by the change to the company has to be evaluated and addressed. So as defined in section 4.2.3, a medical device file shall be maintained for each medical device family and include or reference records to demonstrate conformity to requirements and records of design change. So the output of this design needs to be part of this medical device file. You don't need to have all of the design files and the plan and the change in the medical device file. Those can be held as part of the design files, but there should be a reference to the to conformity to requirements and to any recorded design changes. So if you need help, contact us at technicon.com or email us at technicon1986@sbcglobal.net or call us at 708-814-3685. And go out and have a wonderful day.